Hello! Thank you for attending this presentation, and thank you to Stingray and the Outdoor Expo for inviting me to do a presentation. My name is Jen Shears. I am from Rocky Harbour, and I will be speaking to you today about hunting for the future. I am a big hunter, fisher, avid outdoors person, and hunting is a huge part of my life. It's a huge part of my upbringing and how I'm living today and hopefully into the future. Hunting is a really important component of conservation. It is great for physical health of humans, for environmental health, for animal welfare, for the economy, for biodiversity, and so many other reasons. And hopefully hunting will continue as a tool for sustainability and conservation into the future. I'm hopeful that it will, but I do know and acknowledge that it will require the engagement of a few key groups, and that's what my presentation will focus on today. The three key groups for ensuring that hunting does continue into the future, that us, our children, and our grandchildren have the opportunities to live sustainably off the land, and that it is a success going forward. So before I get into those three key groups and why I'm passionate about them, I'll just touch on my outdoor story to give you a bit of background for me. So I was raised outdoors on wild food, wild clothing, doing all kinds of activities. My sister and I in the photo with one of the first bears that we were part of harvesting. That was in the Lewis Hills, which is where we grew up. And the outdoors was just part of our life. Wild food was a staple in our house. We had friends come over all the time, and they were always afraid to eat what we had for supper because they never knew what it was going to be. Could have been moose, bear, caribou, small game, birds, fish. No one really knew. It was kind of like whatever we hauled out of the freezer was for supper. So they like to joke about it these days still, that when they came to our house, they never knew what to expect. But it certainly opened their eyes to the possibilities around wild food, and that makes me really happy. After my upbringing surrounded by the outdoors, I pursued education at Memorial University at Grenfell campus in environmental biology, and I went on to work for about 15 years at Parks Canada, which is Canada's national parks, national historic sites, and national marine conservation areas. For a lot of years, I was an interpreter, so I would give guided walks. I would take people out onto the landscape, show them, talk about the nature, have them experience the culture and everything, and really help people foster a sense of connection and stewardship to what our nature and culture is in this area. I was also fortunate to be part of a team that won a CEO award for development of a training program. And a lot of great memories and real link in terms of conservation and environmental biology to my hunting and outdoor sustainable lifestyle. As I mentioned, I'm an avid hunter, fisher, business owner. I have traveled extensively around Canada on hunts. Mountain hunts are really near and dear to my heart, like wild sheep hunts, mountain goat hunts, but hunting here in Newfoundland as well, moose, caribou, black bear. I've just recently gotten into fly fishing over the last summer, and I was fortunate enough to luck out and get an Atlantic salmon on my first fishing day. I totally know that that is a fluke and people probably hate me for it, but I truly appreciate it. I know that that is a rare occurrence, and I'm truly humbled and know how lucky I am. So that's me with the first salmon that I got on the trip the last summer. There's a photo of me hiking in the mountains of the Yukon, and that's typical for a summer hunt, even when you're up north and in the mountains. That was on a wild sheep chase. And then another photo there of me, I got my first archery black bear this past summer, and it was quite the experience. I'll talk a little bit more about that later. I'm a business owner, so my businesses are deeply and intricately linked to the environment to renewable resources and sustainability and the outdoors. So I have a wildlife museum here in Rocky Harbour. I have a fur store which specializes in mainly seal products in St. John's called Natural Boutique. And here in Rocky Harbour in Grossmoorn, we have some accommodations that tourists, I guess in non-COVID years, but even in years like now, with the bubbles and with staycations happening, we get to host people and have them experience the incredible opportunities that we do have here in this gorgeous area. I'm also involved in a few outdoor hunting fishing organizations. I'll talk a bit more about those later on, but one that I will bring up and mention specifically right now is the Newfoundland and Labrador Bow Hunters Association. That's a new group that's just getting underway, but we've got some really exciting things coming down the pipe, so I'd encourage you to look them up. We're on Facebook, and we'll be doing some pretty cool things pretty soon. My outdoor pursuits, as much as possible, involve my husband and our 7-year-old daughter, Aspen. Here's a photo of us when we were in the Yukon last summer. This was on a Dall sheep hunt. Aspen came with us due to COVID, and we didn't want to be away from her for potentially a month. So we brought her along. It was like a 3-week trip in the backcountry of the Yukon, and backpacking for about 2 weeks of it, and she was such a trooper. We're hoping through those experiences, like I had growing up, that she will be connected and appreciative of nature, of wildlife, and what we can do for it and what it can do for us. Through my upbringing and my experiences, I'm incredibly passionate about positive messaging related to hunting, fishing, the outdoors. And as I view it, in order for us to continue with our hunting and sustainable fishing lifestyle, we really do need to engage a few groups of people. Those groups that I view as being critical are children, women, and non-hunters. I'll talk a bit about those individually as we go ahead. So, children in the outdoors. As I mentioned, I was raised from as long as I can remember in the outdoors, and certainly I was raised around hunting and fishing. I don't know if that was necessarily my parents' end game, that I would end up hunting and fishing myself, but I do know that them instilling in me a passion for the outdoors and for sustainable living. It also ties into my Mi'kmaq heritage, that we're stewards of the environment and of the creatures of the lands and waters. Just having that within me and knowing that hunting is part of that beautiful system, I think is what their goal was. The fact that I do hunt now and fish is probably just gravy for them, but initially I do believe that they just wanted to expose me to it so that I would know that that is how intricate and beautiful systems interact between humans and wildlife. Children are the future. It's kind of cliche, but it's very true in terms of policy decisions, in terms of conservation and societal views around everything, not just the outdoors and hunting, but given that's the scope of the presentation, children will be the adults to determine whether hunting and fishing is a valid or a legitimate activity. And we are, as parents and as adults, the biggest influence on young children. So starting them young, before media or friends who might not have that intimate link with nature influence them themselves, is critical. When you are engaging children, it is important to take special care to engage them properly, because there is a fine line sometimes, and you can turn off children if you're too forceful in what you're trying to subject them to. And that's not at all what we want to happen. We want it to be an enjoyable experience for them. The goal, like I said, with my parents, I don't know if it was that they wanted me to become a hunter or that they just wanted to show me that it's part of our lifestyle, that it is good for us and for animal populations. But that's kind of the importance of getting children involved early. So when you bring children into the outdoors, it's good to invest in good gear so that they're comfortable. There's nothing worse than being cold and wet. I say invest, but there are lots of secondhand items that are for sale on Facebook marketplaces and things like that too. So you don't need to, spend a lot of money or go in the hole for it, but just make sure that they do have the gear that they need so that they are comfortable. Setting reasonable expectations for yourself is key, and for the child too, depending on how gung-ho they are about it. But for example, when I was going out for my caribou last fall and Aspen ended up coming along, I really wanted to get one with my bow last year. I had been applying about 4 years before I got the license, but when she came along, I realized that getting one with my bow was probably not going to happen. So I had to rein back my expectations, and I knew that if I were to get a caribou at all and she was there, that it would be a wonderful experience. And sure enough, it was. Sometimes children can make mistakes. Either they're too loud or they move a little bit too much, and it can scare an animal off. So if, for example, they make a mistake like that, don't get mad at them because it will just set them off. Use it as maybe an opportunity to teach them that animals have really great senses of smell and hearing, and we need to be careful in the future and, teach them about animals in that respect. Don't put them off or get mad at them. I've come to learn, for adults too, but children especially, snacks and treats are really important. One thing that I do is if I'm in a bear stand with Aspen and I have like a noisy granola bar that I plan on eating, before I go out, I'll take it out of the wrapper and wrap it in paper towel. And that way, when we go to eat it, it doesn't make a sound. So try to think ahead and what the implications will be for when you do actually go to eat the snack. I find mixing in activities like fishing, hunting, birding, games, having a boil up, a campfire are all things that add to the experience. So don't just head out and, have the goal of we're going to get a moose and that's it, full steam ahead. The more that you can engage them and mix it up and keep their attention spans strong, the better. It will bode better for maybe not even necessarily your success of harvesting an animal, but in terms of having them on board with the whole experience. We like to do things like scavenger hunts, for example. If we are going out to look for a moose, on our way, we'll say, how many different types of trees do you think you can spot? How many birds will you see? How many sets of animal tracks? And then that way it keeps the child engaged as they're on their way. Start children with less strenuous activities. So that means don't make them walk 30 miles on the first day, or don't make them scale a mountain right away. Things like even trapping or fishing, sitting in a bear stand, or trying to put a stock on a caribou herd or something like that, even if you're not hunting, to get pictures and stuff, could be a great start or a great intro. Something that I found was really interesting for Aspen was having her involvement in all the aspects. So having her use the binoculars and looking through the spotter to see what she could see, teaching her how to do calls, and then she would try to do calls. And in fact, she was able to stop my caribou when I ended up being able to take a shot because she was doing a caribou call. So that was pretty cool at 6 years old. When we got the caribou down, processing it, it was so funny. She said at one point, I think I'm going to throw up, but she ended up, getting her hands into it and helping us with the processing. And that was a real formative experience for her. And when you start them young like that, then when they do see moose quarters hanging or a dead animal, it's not such a shock to them. It's just something that's always been. So I highly encourage starting probably even earlier than 6 to get them around it. And then getting them involved in photos. Obviously, I think we would these days, with social media and everything, but having them even take pictures on their own devices, like their iPads, and then that way when they're home weeks or years later, they can scroll back through and they'll remember it. And that's kind of good reinforcement of the great memories that they had in the outdoors. Telling the child and others how proud you are of their effort. Everyone loves praise, especially children. So the more that you can brag and boast about how well they did, it'll, again, just reinforce the positive experience. As much as I hate to say it, bring along an iPad or tablet just for any downtime or slow times, and it'll get the child to kind of reset and have a new burst of attention span for when you do get back to the actual hunting. And every now and again, sneak in messages around safety and conservation. Safety, of course, you should probably even touch on that before you get out there in terms of firearm safety and safety when you're on equipment, if you're on quad or on snowmobile, and just around animals in the outdoors. We don't have to worry about things like grizzly bears and stuff here, but certainly before we took Aspen up into the Yukon mountains for a few weeks, we had to have those conversations beforehand. And the talks about conservation, it talks about some of the main reasons why we're out there and how by actually hunting and fishing, we are conserving the populations and contributing to their success for future generations. All of that summarized, though, the key thing in terms of keeping kids wanting to come back for more is to make it fun. When you talk to them at the end of the trip and say, what did you think of it? The best answer you could ever get was, that was awesome, or that was fun, because it means it'll be something that when you bring it up again, they'll be really eager to go after. So the next group that I'll touch on that I think is critical for the success and the future of hunting and fishing and outdoors is women. So when we talk to women about their motivations for maybe beginning hunting, I would say one of the top answers is the involvement in the field to table process, and specifically knowing where their food comes from, both from a health perspective, because when out in the field and harvesting an animal, you know that it's organic, it's not pumped full of chemicals, and you also have an animal welfare perspective on it. The animal wasn't penned up its whole life. It didn't live a miserable life. It was wild and free, and you know how it died, not just how it lived, but how it died. And we hope that as much as possible that it is a quick, humane death. And so that is really important to people. And when we speak with women, it's important to them when they do decide to take up hunting as one of the primary reasons. Another set of reasons why women are interested in taking up hunting is that it gives them a sense of pride, of self-reliance, and of independence. So knowing that you can go out and harvest food for your family is a really rewarding and empowering thing. And that is a major motivator for women who are taking up hunting and fishing. Also becoming part of a conservation community and knowing that you are contributing to the long-term health of wildlife populations and of their success as well is a motivator for women. There are barriers, though, for women, despite the big increase in ladies in taking up fishing, hunting, and outdoor activities. There are a host of things that kind of do hold them back. Namely, things like sexism, kind of the old boys club that hunting camps can be sometimes. It's a very heavily male-dominated industry or lifestyle, so as a woman trying to enter that can be a little bit intimidating. Being afraid of making mistakes and even not knowing what you don't know. That's a big barrier and intimidation. Like, I don't even know what gear I need. I don't know when I get the gear what it means. So those are barriers that we need to work on to engage more women. Childcare, it might sound like we're pinning that on women, but it is a big barrier for a lot of women that if they don't necessarily want to try to learn to hunt with their children in tow, although I do recommend that because it's a great learning process for everybody, having access to childcare for the long days that you might need on your excursions can be a barrier. Also, there is a societal view that women are more domesticated and or more nurturing than maybe what society pictures as a hunter being, like not being out in the field, being rough and tumble, wanting to kill an animal, which is ultimately what we're ending up with when we go hunting. And also, when there's hate that's spurred from that societal view, it typically focuses on a woman's appearance and the attacks and the hate that people like me get online. As women seem to be a bit more vicious, I would say, than some of my male counterparts in the hunting lifestyle online. So all of those things do qualify as barriers for women. However, as I said, as more women get into hunting and fishing in the outdoors, there are more barriers being broken, and that's thanks to the support systems that are out there. If there is a woman in your life that you want to get involved, connecting her with the support system, whether it be you and your ongoing support of her, or connecting her with an outside group, a formal organization that really specializes in that, either of those things are really great. But having those support systems that are ongoing are really, really critical. So that could be family or friends. On social media like Facebook, Instagram, and other forums online, it's a great resource for people just wanting to pick up hunting, fishing, and the outdoors. Some of them are women specific, some of them aren't, but I would invite you to encourage a new female hunter, or if you are a new hunter or aspiring fisher yourself, avail of those social media platforms that are out there full of people who are willing to assist. There is an organization based out of Nova Scotia called Women That Hunt, and they do some really great things, including a Sharing the Harvest event where they invite the community in for a wild game meal. They offer things like learn to hunt, shoot, fish, so it's a welcoming environment, and there's no one really has any expectations or pressure involved. Everyone knows that they're going there to learn something. They're not expected to know it all. And so Women That Hunt is a fantastic organization to help assist women and even men as well, families, in getting into their outdoor pursuits. And here locally in Newfoundland and Labrador, there's a Becoming an Outdoors Woman program. And I spoke with someone at that office a few days ago, and they informed me that this year, 2021, should be their biggest year yet. They're planning a bunch of different events. They're waiting to get some go-ahead notices based on COVID and stuff, but they're planning on doing their 3-day full retreat, as well as some other sessions and Sharing the Harvest type events as well. And I attended a Becoming an Outdoors Woman convention or retreat about, it must have been 12 years ago now. And when you go there, there's all kinds of different activities you can choose from. Part of one day you could be out shooting. Later on the day you could be learning how to fly fish. There's other ones on like songbird, plant identification, wilderness survival, first aid, and hiking tips and things like that. So it's really great and reassuring when you're surrounded by people who maybe feel the same level of uneasiness as you do, or uncertainty. You don't feel the pressure that everyone around you just knows more than you. And it's even great for someone who is experienced to go, because the community that you find there is wonderful. So the third group that we're going to talk about, and it's last but it's certainly not least, if anything, I think it's the most important group, it's non-hunters. So we spoke about children and women getting into hunting and fishing in the outdoors. Obviously, that's in the context that they're non-hunters, but in those respects, we're talking about maybe getting them involved as hunters eventually. When I speak about non-hunters here, it really is in the context of they might not ever become hunters, but we want them to become advocates, or at least understand and acknowledge the importance of hunting, fishing, and outdoors sports in the sustainability and wildlife management aspect of things. Non-hunters are the vast majority. So when we look at a study conducted on Ontario on Canadians and their outdoor pursuits, they determined that almost 3 million Canadians fish, about 1.3 million Canadians hunt, and about 45,000 trap. So assuming some of those overlap, some of the trappers are undoubtedly considered hunters, some of the hunters fish. So you're looking at probably a maximum of 4 million people in Canada who hunt, trap, or fish. That leaves about 30 million who don't. So hunters are the minority by far in Canada. And we see often in today's society when people are influencing policy, not necessarily based on science, but based on emotion. If we just look at how things have gone with the seal hunt in Newfoundland and Labrador over the past few generations and decades, and how policies or markets and things have been shifted and changed because of the overwhelming public emotional aspect of it. Nothing to do with the science. Even out in BC, the grizzly hunt was halted a few years ago, and the government of the day came out and blatantly acknowledged this decision to ban grizzly hunting has nothing to do with science. It has everything to do with the emotional pleas of the constituents. So it's really important that the people who don't participate in these activities are able to be advocates, or at least not be against us. So there is a big difference between non-hunters and anti-hunters. In this context, they're not the same. Anti-hunters are a group that actually campaign against hunting. They're against everything it stands for. They are doing drives to get it to stop completely. Whereas non-hunters are kind of like the middle ground. They don't necessarily feel one way or another. But they are potentially easily swayed. So if they see an image out there of someone treating an animal improperly or inhumanely, and that person is classified as a hunter, they could easily go to the end of the spectrum to say, I don't like hunting, I don't think it should exist anymore. And if we have too many of those, that'll cause a real problem for us in terms of our social license to be able to hunt. Social license deals with the fact that society needs to deem an activity as being legitimate to allow it to continue. And so we are looking to increase the social license, the breadth of the social license to hunt. So meat eaters, I guess, are our closest potentially allies, our low-hanging fruit, because you get people who eat meat and at the same time attack hunters for what they do, but they don't really make the connection. So my thing is, rational talk will always sway rational people. So if we as hunters and outdoors people get our ducks in a row, get our messages out there, our images and all that, we can clearly and really beautifully communicate what it is we have at heart when we are hunting. I've experienced it many times in my business selling seal fur products. I've been on the mainland at trade shows, and a conversation has started with someone walking up to me saying, you should be ashamed of yourself. And at that moment, if I had put a wall up and just said, go away, what happened wouldn't have ended up happening, which was I engaged in a conversation with the lady. And by the time it was all said and done, she was actually angry that she had been misled by all the anti-seal hunt propaganda. She was a firm believer in using biodegradable and sustainable products. She thought seals were endangered, and all the misconceptions that are out there, thanks to targeted attacks on our industries. And she ended up buying a pair of seal boots. So it transitioned from you should be ashamed of yourself to her leaving with a pair of boots because she wanted to support and celebrate an industry that she had learned a lot about, and she felt like she had been misled for so long. So rational talk will sway rational people, and if we as outdoors people get our messages out there properly, then we do have an incredible power to change things for people. Some simple ways that we can impact non-hunter perceptions include sharing the meat that we get from our harvests. So we'll often do it among the hunting community, but if you seek out maybe a non-hunter and offer some to them, then they actually see the reward and they see what it is that you're working so hard to get when you're out in the field for all those days. Also, sharing the experience, bringing a non-hunter on a hunt. Again, not to get them to all of a sudden decide that they want to be a hunter, although it's great if they do, but just to show them what goes behind it, all the work that's involved, the respect that we have in our hearts for the wildlife that we're after, just our time in nature that we value and appreciate, and how all that links together. So bringing them along is a great thing, and it's a way that we can positively influence perceptions. The Wild Harvest Initiative is an initiative that is very much Newfoundland and Labrador based, in that Shane Mahoney is spearheading it through Conservation Visions. And their goal is to one of their goals is to basically quantify all the wild game and wild game resources that are used, and what that means economically, and how much money worth of food are people getting that might not otherwise get it. And when you submit information like that to governments, it helps them really present their cases for hunting and for outdoor activities in a way that can resonate with a lot of people. Facts are important. Emotion is probably more important in terms of swaying people, but when you can combine both of those things together, you've got a recipe for a real powerful communication tool. Honor the Hunt it's an Instagram account actually, but it has really brought to the forefront the real meaning and the real reach that photos that aren't the traditional grip and grin photos, trophy photos as people would probably call them, that those non-traditional hunting photos can have the good impact. So it's usually people with the animal that they've just harvested and just taking a moment to acknowledge and appreciate it. There's no celebrating and shouting. It's just spending time and giving appreciation and showing it through your imagery that you're putting out there on social media. So if a non-hunter comes across that, it might make them take a second look and say, yeah, there is a heart and there is a spirit behind the person who has just taken this animal's life. So I'd encourage you to look up that. Also, Blood Origins, it's a prime example for the fact and emotion sharing at the same time, and campaigning to support hunting initiatives that are sustainable all around the world, and I highly recommend checking them out as well. Even something like our choice of words. There's a big debate going around there now in the social media world about hunters using words like kill versus harvest or take. And to some people, it might not be a big deal, but if you look at it from the perspective of a non-hunter who doesn't really know what to expect in terms of the hunting world, a word like kill might make it seem like that's what it's all about, when we as outdoors people and hunters and anglers know that that's not at all what it's about. It's the end portion of it, but that's not necessarily why we do it. It's not just to kill something. So being aware of our language and the audiences that we're talking to and what words we use, all those things help form the public perception, which will be so critical in going forward. So the mentoring challenge is something that I really love. It involves introducing at least one new person to the hunting, fishing, outdoor lifestyle annually. And it really does have meaningful impacts on people and on their perceptions. So on the right side of the presentation, it's a picture of myself and my friend Jen. She's a non-hunter that I took on my bear hunt last year. So she was there for the sit, for the shot, the tracking, the processing, and the first meal from the bear. So she was able to get the whole hunting experience and see what was behind it and all the emotions that come with it. When it was all over, I asked her, like, what is your perception on it? How do you feel about all of what went down? And she said it was magical. And in the sense of the emotions and feeling that connection to the circle of life and knowing where your food came and watching it from the bear stand to coming onto your plate. So it was a really cool experience for both of us. The middle picture is a photo of our annual New Year's Eve party. So what we do every New Year's Eve is we cook up and serve samples of all the different meats that we harvested that calendar year. So this year we had things like mule deer, bighorn sheep, muskox, polar bear, Dall sheep, black bear, and moose. So we had quite the spread, and it just allows our friends and family members who aren't hunters, and even those who are, I guess, to really see the fruits of our labor when we go on those hunting excursions and work so hard, what we're bringing home and how it can sustain us and sustain them and how we're sharing it with them. And then the picture with my caribou and aspen jumping, you may recognize that photo. It was the cover of the Newfoundland Sportsman just last fall of the hunting annual, the very first digital edition. And it was really cool to have her out there and to call in the caribou, as I mentioned earlier, for him to stop and be able to get a shot off. It was a real formative experience for her. And like Jen and Aspen, whether they end up becoming hunters or not, those experiences are formative in that it helps them see what is behind the hunt, and that we're just not, bloodthirsty, that there's true substance and meaning behind it all. And I'm hopeful that if the question or debate ever came up about the legitimacy or the need for hunting, that they would be able to articulate a bit better now than they would have beforehand what hunting is or what it means. So I'd encourage you to do the same. Take out someone in the field, share your meat with them, and keep the mentoring going and see where it can take you. So thank you very much for spending your time with me today. It was really great to communicate my passion around hunting and the future of hunting and the 3 key groups that I feel are critical for the future of us to be able to do what we love to do: children, women, and non-hunters. As I mentioned, I get a lot of hate online, so I'd love getting good messages too. So by all means, reach out. I'm on Instagram. I'm most active there. So my handle there is Smidgen, Smidjen. You can email me, and my email address is hello@smidgen.com. And I also have a blog which has recipes, and it has just details on different hunts or excursions that I'm going on, and it can really help you see what's going on and even help you with the mentoring process, because if someone's unsure about going out there because they're young or they're a woman and they don't feel like they belong, you can show them an example of someone who does just that. I get a lot of hate and those good messages saying my wife is going to come along on my elk hunt or my deer hunt or my moose hunt because she's seeing that you can do it through your photos. Like, that means the world to me, and it makes all the nonsense worthwhile. We're also going to be having some episodes on Wild TV as part of Canada Hunts. Last year we filmed our Dall sheep hunt and our deer hunts and our other sheep hunt and our Newfoundland stuff. So there'll be episodes on Wild TV coming this summer and fall. So you can check them out there to follow along some adventures. So again, thank you so much for tuning in. Please reach out if you'd like, and have fun and be safe out there.